What is my favorite Bible story and how do I view it from a Christian witch standpoint? So, I don't know. This is kind of a hard question to ask because there are a lot of really good stories, both in the canon Bible and like just outside the canon, like the Acts of Paul and Thecla. But I'm not gonna lie, I do think one of my favorite Bible stories is the story of the Witch of En Dor. I've talked about the Witch of En Dor before. It is in 1 Samuel, and it is at a point where King Saul has outlawed all forms of, like, especially and specifically Canaanite necromancy and divination and all that kind of stuff. Outlawed these pagan practices to keep in line with the law of God, which is like, hey, as Israelites, you're not supposed to be doing that, right? So he's outlawed all this shit, but that doesn't mean that the practices completely disappeared. And so the Witch of En Dor is someone who does, in fact, know how to do these practices. And when King Saul has lost the favor of God, and when he has fucked up immeasurably for not, like, totally all the Amalekites, God doesn't answer him through any of the traditional means, like the Urim and Thummim or the prophets or anything. So King Saul, under the cloak of night, disguises himself, finds this witch who knows how to do this shit, and asks her to bring up the spirit of the prophet Samuel, who by this point had died, and had told Saul that he was going to get his shit rocked. And the Witch of En Dor is like, dude, like, the practice is banned. I'm not trying to get my ass killed. And he's like, no, go ahead and do it. And so she does it, and then figures out that this is the king that banned the practice, and she's like, you son of a bitch, you set me up. And he's like, no harm will come to you, I promise. Like, in the name of God, I promise. Which is interesting, because we never hear from her again. And it's implied that she, didn't have any consequences for doing the thing. So that's fine. More importantly, her magic works. And Samuel's spirit pops up from the fucking ground and and is just like, why are you interrupting my beauty sleep? For your bitch ass bullshit. And so they go back and forth while the witch is just sitting there, like, kind of fumbling around. And then eventually, Samuel, very interestingly, very specifically, says to Saul, hey buddy, you and I both will be asleep in the tomb, okay? By tomorrow. We'll both be stuck in Sheol together. So no heaven, no hell. Just Sheol. Whether you did good, whether you did bad, you all go to the same place. Prophet, fucked up king that went against God, all in the same spot. So that right there alone is very interesting. But what's more interesting, and, like, the thing that I love the most about the story, is how in the end, Saul, like, falls down, just depressed, inconsolable. And the Witch of En Dor refuses to let him leave until he has eaten a meal. She's like, listen, I did what you asked, you're gonna do what I say now. You're gonna stay here, you're gonna have a little nap, you're gonna have a fucking snack, and you're gonna shut the fuck up, and you're gonna go, and you're gonna do what you gotta do. Which kind of draws, like, a weird parallel between the Witch of En Dor and God. Because God does exactly that to the prophet Elijah, who wants to lay down and die in the desert. Forsaken, driven out by Jezebel and all that. Elijah says, God, just fucking kill me. And God's like, have a snack, have a nap, and then do what you gotta do. The fallen king and the witch he disenfranchised, the prophet and his God. It's like a dichotomy, but at the same time it's connected. And it also just, like, it really shows the humanity of the witch. Like, the witch, obviously she wasn't gonna go do this thing, but the witch does it, and whatever. That doesn't mark her character, though. She's a good person. She's a hospitable person. She's a compassionate person. And she shows such grace and mercy to this king, who then does go off and die in the battle against David, right? Who then becomes King David and all that kind of stuff. But that is such a tender human moment. And, like, it's just the highlight of that story to me. Past Saul actually popping up, past the whole concept of the witch and whatever, past how cool the title The Witch of En Dor is, just her humanity and her grace and her compassion and the way in which it just directly parallels the way that God picks up Elijah is just crazy to me. It's so fascinating. And it feels to me like God was working through that witch, not just to tell Saul that he was fucked, right, with Samuel, who's still correctly prophesied even from beyond the grave, but just to use her to demonstrate that his mercy and his love is found in the weirdest fucking places, which lines up also with David. David, who, by all intents and purposes, was really nothing special, and really, like, was just a kid with a fucking rock sling against Goliath, and he's the one getting picked up to be king. He's the one getting picked up to be king. The Witch of En Dor is the one getting chosen to facilitate God's prophets and then display God's mercy and compassion to this fallen king. Like, it's just the Witch of Endor, my beloved. I will never not love her so much. And it's such a shame that so many people read that story and just see some like evil witch or some sinner or something who has no significance and tells us nothing about God. She tells us so much about God, and it's just so sad to see people just bowl past her like they often do.